if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, then you may want to click away because we're about to get into some very serious beef. You see what I did there? The whole beef, it works on two. Anyways, all jokes aside, guys, let's get serious here for a second. Well, as serious as you can get, I guess, over action figure drama. It really isn't even drama. It's essentially just two of the biggest content creators on the platform within the action figure community that have essentially taken like opposite stance on a particular issue, and we're talking about the Maximum Spider-Man Marvel Legends action figure. I know I promised that the last video was going to be my last attempt at covering this particular collectible, but I guess this is kind of inadvertently about that figure, but not really. I guess what I wanted to talk about more so than anything is their breakdown of the figure and their personal opinions, and I got a couple of different requests for just my personal take on the whole ShartimusPrime situation, and I decided to reference Articulated Ninja just because I felt like they both addressed each other and kind of threw minor jabs at each other, and I felt like it was a fascinating situation. As I said, I would have probably never talked about something like this on the channel, but just because I had a couple of people request it, I decided, why not? I'll give you guys my personal take on the entire situation. So just to break things down, and I should clarify, I don't think that Shartimus ever threw a jab directly at or even mentioned Articulated Ninja. I think he just used an image that Articulated Ninja had utilized for one of his videos and kind of like poked fun at that image, or just like dissected it and put it under a microscope, whereas in Articulated Ninja like directly referenced something that Shartimus had said on social media. So like I said, I'm not going to break down like every single phrase or every single word that was uttered in these videos because they're pretty long and extensive, but I'll try to give you guys the gist of what each of them said. Now, I will say, if you guys are interested in watching the original videos, I definitely suggest you guys do that. I'll throw up the thumbnails, and then more than likely I'll throw up links in the description, that way you guys can actually watch each video. As I said, in a nutshell, it's kind of lukewarm, but still there was some animosity between both of these content creators. And I will clarify, I'm not necessarily like a quote-unquote diehard of either one of these content creators, and I think I should clarify that. I feel like I'm incredibly unbiased. I have no affiliations here. I do watch a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot, but I do casually watch ShartimusPrime's content. I have talked about some of his interviews with McFarlane and how testy they can get. I've had like entire videos on that, and I've also watched some of just his reviews overall, because he does get a lot of action figures before anybody else. And then obviously Articulated Ninja sometimes has some pretty interesting takes. I will say I like the fact that he goes at OMs, and that's something that you don't really see from some of the bigger content creators, and I do really appreciate that he tends to be the voice of the entire community at times. Having said all of that, I think that I should break down what ShartimusPrime essentially said in his video, and it was pretty straightforward. He essentially tried to kind of like direct the hate or the attention away from this Marvel Legends review. I think he like made some references towards like ZD toys, which I have no experience with, but he said they were essentially garbage. And then he went on to bash Funko Pops, which I think is like very low-hanging fruit there. Let's be brutally honest, most people that collect action figures kind of hate on Funko Pops. Now personally, I've already made a couple of videos where I've been bashing the hobby as a whole because of how mass-produced and how ridiculously easy they are to obtain. And so a lot of the original collectors that liked Funko Pops actually enjoyed, you know, going out hunting and having a lot of these pops or these characters be scarce. And I think Funko has gone away from that, but that's neither here nor there. And I think it's kind of a little bit of a low blow to talk about these companies when really they're irrelevant here. I mean, we're talking about the Marvel Legends Maximum Spider-Man action figure. There's no need to bring Funko Pops into this conversation, or ZD toys. You know, they're not innocent manufacturers, and I have criticized, like I said, Funko in the past, but I just felt like they were completely irrelevant in this particular situation. And so I think it was kind of fascinating that he tried to kind of misdirect everybody's attention. He also did something that I thought was kind of hilarious, but he said, or he encouraged people to not buy the action figure, or people that quote unquote were not hardcore Spider-Man fans to not purchase the figure. That way he would be able to pick up extras at a lower price point. I thought that was kind of funny, but simultaneously I think it kind of sent a mixed message, because in previous occasions he has mentioned that this is a figure that people should pick up or people should be excited about. but then kind of backtracked a little bit and said, to only pick this figure up if you were a hardcore Spider-Man fan. At the end of the day, everybody's going to choose what it is that they pick up. And it felt kind of weird that he was trying to kind of like build up some support in the community against the action figure, but then simultaneously talking about how amazing it is and how great it looks in images. He also went on to say that we shouldn't judge the action figure until we have it in hand, which is, I don't know, kind of counterproductive to say that we should first purchase it to find out if it's going to be any good. I think promotional images and just the figure and display should be able to do that. And according to what the community is saying, a lot of people just weren't convinced with those images. So I was just personally very confused at his message. It seemed like he wanted to push the figure, but then at the same time, he wanted to appease his fan base that was kind of really upset at him. I thought the entire situation with Shartimus is pretty interesting. I've said this before, look, at the end of the day, this is mostly his livelihood. I think he has like a side gig or something like that. He's mentioned it in some videos. But for the most part, this is how he makes a living. And sometimes, and I've made content specifically geared towards bigger content creators where I feel like sometimes they just gloss over some of the issues with the figures, or they're just like essentially representatives of the company to a certain degree. Like they're just there to try to sell you on certain collectibles, and they stop really being reviews, quote unquote, which I have no problem with. I just have an issue with them being sometimes a little bit misleading with using that terminology of reviewing an action figure. If you want to have like a first look, or if you want to do like an unboxing or something along those lines, that's different. But when you're putting the review term into a video, we assume that you're going to give us an unbiased look at a figure, and sometimes that doesn't happen. I'm not accusing Shartimus of that, and I will say a lot of people that came at Shartimus for what they considered biased opinions, a lot of the time there are some bigger or just as big as he is, content creators within the community that actually do similar things, where they tell you to to avoid figures that you don't like, or stop complaining if you're not interested in the figure, just move along. That's kind of a pretty consistent way of a lot of these big time content creators looking at things. So I feel like it's a little bit out of left field to just attack Shartimus for saying something like this, when there are plenty of other content creators that are doing the exact same thing, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of hate towards them. So as a whole, as I said, it's just kind of a mixed message. Now, looking at it from the point of view of Articulated Ninja, he did make some very valid points, and as I said before, he's always kind of a voice for the community if there's something that's overpriced, or if he feels like the community is getting taken advantage of. I like the fact that he's willing to speak out. However, there were some things in his video that I disagree with vehemently. The biggest thing that he tried to point out is the fact that Hasbro tried to create this false narrative of scarcity for this figure, that this figure was selling out because it was some sort of business tactic. And even if it is, I will say Hasbro's well within their rights to do that. I don't think that it's the worst thing ever. There are plenty of other hobbies that do like the exact same thing. Comic book communities go through the exact same situation where you have ratio variants, you have store exclusives, you have subscription exclusives, you have a ton of different variations of one particular comic book with different covers. People run into the same situation when they collect shoes. How difficult was it to get Kobe Bryant shoes right after he passed away, or some of the Travis Scott, for example, Air Jordans? They're very difficult to acquire. Why? Because they want to create scarcity. They want their product to be at the forefront. They want people to be talking about it on social media. It's not like the dirtiest thing ever. This is something that companies do pretty consistently, and for people to pretend like it only happens within the action figure community, I think is a pretty hypocritical way of looking at things. That's on top of the fact that nobody has ever come out and said this. Like, there are no numbers, there are no statistics to say this. And by the way, the pre-orders selling out, that's a real thing. There are a lot of people out there that are assuming that Hasbro will potentially in the future have these figures available again, and that may be the case, But I don't think that that's something that consistently happens from bigger manufacturers. Like McFarlane has had this happen to him as well. We had the Wonder Woman collector's edition action figure sell out, and we've had a number of other ones that sell out pretty quickly. He doesn't go back into production with these figures because they're bigger. They usually mass produce a good quantity at the beginning, and then they just don't have them available. HasLabs are completely different, and so was the Dragon Man, because those were made to order. Like the exact amount that people decided to order, those were the exact amount that were going to go into production, whereas in pre-orders it's kind of a loose number. It's more of an idea for the retailers to get an idea of how much it is that they're going to order from the manufacturer. So for him to say that Hasbro should not sell out of pre-orders, I think that's a false narrative, and he knows that. I mean, the smaller companies that he mentioned, like Ramen Toys and Jada Toys, and how they never run out of pre-orders, or they often come out and say, hey, we're going to release more. A lot of the reasons for that is because they're very, very small companies, and so they can mass produce 100% of all the figures that they plan on manufacturing on day one. So usually what happens, like Jada Toys will maybe pre-order or will release maybe like 15% of what they plan on producing, and then within the next 6 months will trickle out to more collectibles or some more figures, the exact same figure, just over and over throughout the next few months, because they can't afford to mass produce these on day one, compared to Hasbro and McFarlane, where usually their pre-orders sell out because that's all that they plan on manufacturing. Not because they don't want to go back into production. They probably have other plans or other figures that are already getting made in the factory, so it's probably very difficult for them to go back in there and re-release action figures. As I said, if you really want to attack Hasbro for having pre-orders sell out, there are plenty of other OEMs that have ran into this particular problem, whether it's NECA, whether it's McFarlane. It's not the end of the world. And for him to compare like a HasLab project to pre-orders, we both know the difference. We've been collecting long enough for him to kind of make an assumption like that. Let's say even if they decided to go back into production for this figure, is that the worst thing in the world? There are more collectors that are able to pick this figure up, and even if they decided to just keep quiet and allow the hype to keep building up for this collectible, they're not the only company to do it. It's like pretty common practice within hobby communities or within the hobby industry to do this. We even see this happen with like collectible cards, where you get random variation of cards in each box, and that creates an element of scarcity, and a lot of people will have to go out and buy multiple different boxes just to find like a couple of cards that they're interested in. Is that them taking advantage of their consumer base? Probably, but it's pretty common practice, and most people that are in those hobbies are pretty much used to that type of circumstances. They know that they have to be on top of their game to pick up figures, and this has been pretty common within the action figure collecting community as well. We know that if a hot character goes up for pre-order, we have to be there at that exact moment, because some of these sell out within minutes. Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. It's just a byproduct of collecting that particular item. We're not the only community, we're not the only consumer group to run into these type of issues. It's pretty common across the globe, and for people that collect things other than action figures, they'll be pretty familiar with these type of situations. I will say, in a nutshell, I'm kind of like in between both of them. I do agree with what Articulated Ninja said. I do feel like the action figure is overpriced, and I could sit here talking hours and hours and dissecting, plastic ratios and, different types of engineering that went into this figure, but it is what it is. I do feel that it is overpriced, but simultaneously, I think a lot of people are attacking Hasbro for other reasons that have nothing to do with the action figure. If you're here to say the figure is overpriced, I completely agree. I think it should have been $40. For people that are saying that it should have been under $35, I think you're being unrealistic, but $40 would have been a perfect price point. Simultaneously, I think that what Shartimus did here kind of made him look a little bit weak. He kind of like backtracked just a little bit, made it seem like he was on the fence about the action figure or the price point as well, knowing full well that he's probably going to receive this figure for free. So I think they were both kind of like on opposite sides of the spectrum, and I think it's important to see things from, multiple different angles, and that's exactly what today's video is about. They both made some valid points. They both have some very good reasons to believe believe what it is that they believe. But at the end of the day, that's one of the problems when you go too deep on one side. Sometimes you just don't see things from the other angle or the other perspective. I see this a lot in politics, and there's just no compromising. So it just from my personal perspective, from my angle, I feel like yes, the action figure was overpriced. It should have been $40, but at the same time, I can also commend Hasbro for at least putting forth the effort to try to give us like a newly engineered action figure with a bunch of accessories, and I think we should at least appreciate that. Whether you want to purchase it at $50 or not, that's really up to you. In my personal opinion, it was overpriced, but at the same time, to attack Hasbro or to try to like create narratives out of nowhere, like the fact that they're trying to create scarcity for an action figure when their pre-orders sold out, it's pretty common. I mean, action figures sell out all the time. And for this figure, by the way, this figure was actually available for more time than some other figures like store exclusives, like Target exclusives, where sometimes they fly off the shelves. You actually had a decent window to pick this figure up. But I need a glass of water. I need to just calm down, take some chill pills, because I kind of tend to get a little bit riled up when it comes down to collectibles. I can't help it. I love ranting. I love talking. And more importantly, when it's about action figures, because that's, I'm passionate about the hobby. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Did you guys pick it up? Do you plan on picking it up? I swear on my children, this is the last time that I will potentially probably talk about the Marvel Legends Maximum Spider-Man action figure. I definitely don't want to keep bashing this. I feel like I've beaten this to death at this point. Let's move on. Let's talk about other stuff. I promise my next few videos are going to be a little bit more positive. They're going to be a little bit more on the bright side of things, and not as negative, where I feel like today's video kind of got a little bit negative. But look, before I end today's video, and I should clarify this, both content creators have value. If you guys haven't checked out either one of these guys, there's definitely value in watching Shartimus get some of the newer action figures. Articulated Ninja has some great reviews. He has some great customs. They're both two of the best content creators out there, and if you guys like action figures, you guys will like both of these guys. You may not like their personal opinions and their personal perspectives, and some of the videos may rub you the wrong way, but I think that's what YouTube is here for. I like listening to people's perspectives, even if their opinions differ from mine. It's still interesting to listen to people, and sometimes you listen to the opposite side and it gets your juices flowing, and you get like that creativity bug going, and I think it kind of benefits everybody. So there you guys have it. I gave my take. I gave my 2 cents. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this type of rambling content about action figures, make sure to stay tuned, because we do this pretty consistently. We're going up to like about 4 to 5 times on a weekly basis. So thank you guys so much. Make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to enjoy the hobby. Those collectibles, don't just let them collect dust. Actually play with them, photograph them, enjoy them. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.